Get ready to say goodbye to a lot of familiar bird names around Wisconsin. There's Cooper's hawk, Wilson's warbler, Franklin gull, and dozens more. That's because the American Ornithological Society has vowed to rename all birds with English names. For this month's Chirp Chat, Lake Effect's Excret Nunez spoke with Jeff Galligan, the co-founder of the BIPOC Birding Club of Wisconsin. He explains the decision and how it's part of an effort to make birding more welcoming to everyone.
I'm excited to be speaking with you today for this episode of Chirp Chat. I thought it'd be nice to talk about the importance of bird names. So, last November, the American Ornithological Society announced its decision to rename all birds with English names. Could you help give me some background on this effort to rename birds? Is this initiative something people have been pushing for a while?
Yeah, that's a great question. The real movement on this issue and the initial real pressure and focus on trying to get this done was made by a group called Bird Names for Birds. And they have a 2020 timeline because this is when all things kind of started happening. So on June 22nd, they sent a letter to the American Ornithological Society and the North American Classification Committee with 182 co-signers. And they were asking or requesting, more likely, they acknowledge the role eponymous common bird names played in perpetuating the effects of colonialism and racism in our country's past. And they had asked specifically that they indicate steps would initiate to address this issue by middle of August of 2020. And on June 30th, the AOS released a statement after receiving their letter. It did not directly address bird names for birds and chose to focus on reviewing a single species, which was McCown's longspur. And this was because McCown was a slaveholder and he was a Confederate general. He was an amateur naturalist. The reason that needs to be changed is because obviously his past is, again, it's clouded, much like John James Audubon. And so they chose to name this bird the thick-billed longspur. So they did one species. And Bird Names for Birds acknowledged this move and expressed appreciation, but also that the issue still needs to be addressed, right? I mean, the whole issue of English names and honorifics and eponyms. So on August 20th, the Ornithological Society put out a statement saying they had just passed the council resolution regarding the English common bird names, and they agreed to work to find ways to make birding more inclusive and to develop strategies for addressing and dealing with English bird names. And this all happened in the span of that 1 year. And so now they've made the decision to start with 70 or 80 birds. I believe there's around 150 birds in North America that have common English names. So there's a lot to do, but I'm sure they're looking initially at the ones that are probably the most egregious, which there are plenty of them.
Right. I was going to ask, so, as a co-founder of the BIPOC Birding Group and a BIPOC birder yourself, how do
Yeah.
you feel about this decision by the AOS?
I think the first thing we need to point out is that, this decision will not end racism or EDI issues within the birding community. It's not going to do that at all, but it is a step in the right direction. And I think it's a fairly significant step, actually. I mean, I'm not going to take away anything from that. It's important. And that's in terms of acknowledging and addressing the racist and colonial past of our country and in bringing the intentional inclusion to birding for all people and for many reasons. And I think some of those are first and foremost, this process is much like the whole Audubon name issue, which I'm a member of the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, formerly Madison Audubon. And we went through that process last year of changing our name from Audubon because of these same issues with his past. He just wasn't a person fit for having something named after him. And so this process isn't part, a righting of wrongs. It's the acknowledgement and addressing of issue of naming birds after mostly white men, many with very sordid, troubling pasts. And I think that removing the name of those who have done egregious things is necessary, right? I mean, it's hard to ask people to come and join you in a birding outing or to join a society that's named after somebody who was a slave owner and return enslaved people, things like that. And I also believe it's an acknowledgement that we need all things outdoors to be truly inclusive and equitable, and they are not that right now, and it's a process, and I'm working on that myself on several fronts, and there is movement, which is positive. And I think that one of the big selling points of the American Ornithological Society is making is that birds need our help more than ever right now, especially songbirds. And by making this decision, it does pave the way for a more diverse birding community and more people who are really informed and concerned about the reduction in songbirds. And that's a very important thing. And we do need everybody on board with that. However, I don't want that message to be lost in the fact that the real issue needing addressing is being equitable and inclusive. And without addressing the past wrongs, we can't get to that point. So for that reason, it's a huge step. And on a personal level, I'm involved in quite a few initiatives that are addressing the lack of diversity in outdoor usage and birding in Wisconsin, and in like environmental and conservation professions and the natural sciences. And I believe you cannot simply state that you want inclusion and diversity. You have to do the often painful work to make it so. And for people of color to feel safe and welcome in the outdoors, we have to start making this happen.
Right. And something I want to touch on that you mentioned
Yeah.
was this decision not only is making birding a more inclusive experience and acknowledging the wrongs of the past, but how is it going to help birders and scientists with identifying birds more accurately in the future?
Yeah, I think that names indicate a physical characteristic, right? Like, if you name a bird after something that is part of what it looks like or how it acts or its habitat, that might help new birders in narrowing down what it might be. I mean, I see that happening. I think that experienced birders and scientists are going to be fine because they already know the birds. They just have to get used to a new name. But I just really think this is more about making birding just a bit more welcoming to BIPOC and other populations traditionally excluded from the birding community, and thus attracting great minds from a relatively untapped resource, and that will benefit birds. So I think it's really more about how we can benefit birds overall by including all people and encouraging all people to be a part of the birding community, of acquiring the kind of knowledge that makes you concerned for what's happening, and then interested in supporting initiatives and organizations that are working to protect songbirds, whether it's through land acquisition, grassland restoration, things like that.
Absolutely. Well, since we're diving deep into why the AOS made this decision, I want to go back to why we're even having this conversation. Why are names powerful? What power can names hold?
Yeah, I think what I would like to see is them not hold any more power than to help identify a bird by something related to that bird with no consideration for humanity at all. I think where the power of a name, and especially in this case, comes into play is because the ties to our colonial and racist past. It's just that's powerful, and that's sending a message by not dealing with that and not accepting or addressing the fact that to a lot of people that brings up painful memories and also a feeling of like people don't care enough to make this change, so how can I be involved in this community? So I
Mhm.
think that's where the power is, and I think we can take that power away, and that negative power away, and just focus on what the bird does or acts like or lives.
Right. Like
Yeah.
actually do something that, because I'm thinking, the birding community here, I feel is super welcoming. And
Hmm.
why don't we, the birds that we appreciate match that energy?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I acknowledge that there's, probably plenty of people who've maybe never really thought about what those bird names mean to people who, are on the tail end of the receiving end of that history.
Mm,
And that continuing to perpetrate that by acknowledging and honoring people who don't really deserve or need to be honored is creating that problem. So this is great.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know the AOS is welcoming public input on
Yeah.
its renaming process.
Yeah.
Do you have a bird name suggestion?
Well, the one that always comes into my mind, it's a simple one, is for the Wilson's warbler to name it the black-capped warbler. I think that makes sense because it's a yellow bird with a very distinct black cap. So if you've never been out birding before and you see a yellow bird with a black cap and then see in the bird book, oh, there's a black-capped warbler, well, you're onto it then. I think that's great. I'd have to think about other ones like Cooper's hawks, Steller's jays, Bonaparte's gulls, Bell's vireo, Nelson sparrows, LeConte sparrows, you name them.
You were
That's
saying
just
all of these names, and I wonder who even are these people?
yeah. Who are these people? That's right. That's exactly right. And there's on the website for Bird Names for Birds, there is a document that shows all of the honorific and eponymous names given to North American birds. And I think it includes Central America and the Caribbean, perhaps. But there's like 150 of them, but they talk about who they're named after and who named them. And there are some notes on some, but at least you got the name of who it's named after. And it's real easy to do a mild dive into who they are and figure out pretty quickly, what their past is. And I also just wish to point out that the argument that, like we're trying to erase history or change history, no, that's not it at all. What we're trying to do is shed light on it and then make the changes that we need to move on as a society in a much, much more friendly, welcoming, inclusive environment.
Right. I appreciate that you mentioned that. And to clarify, the AOS isn't changing the scientific name of a bird. They're addressing the name birds have historically been called.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're not dealing with that now. There is a committee that does work on that. So some of that could change, but it's not related specific to this decision. And one thing that they have committed to doing is rather than choosing English names for birds that live in Latin America or spend part of their time in Latin America or even South America, they're agreeing that they're going to work with ornithologists and scientists and people in Latin and South America before just summarily naming a bird to make it something that's more fair or reasonable or respectful to everybody.
And that makes sense
It sure does. It sure does.
to address the community where a bird actually resides and ask what a name they think
Yes.
would make sense.
That's exactly right. And I'm a part of Bird City, Wisconsin steering committee. And there's a big push right now to look at, rather than just looking at like individual cities and states, to look at like hemispherically, because we have so many birds that may breed and spend the summer in North America, but then they move down to South America for the other part of the year. And bird conservation, if we're doing it here for a bird and then nothing's happening in Latin or South America or vice versa, then we're only solving a part of the problem, right? And so I think that the channels of communication and respect and consideration are important for all of us to look beyond our borders and look at what's best for migrating birds and things in terms of protecting their habitat on both ends of it.
Right. Well, that's definitely an example of how this process will take years to accomplish, but it is progress.
Yes, absolutely.
So, as we previously mentioned, the AOS will start the renaming process this year by focusing on 70 to 80 bird species found in the US and Canada. But what are some birds that can be found in the Wisconsin area that will be renamed?
Oh boy, there's Wilson's warbler is one. Cooper's hawk is another really big one. We have Kirtland's warbler, which is the rarest of warbler species in North America. Bonaparte's gull, Bell's vireo, Swainson's thrush, Wilson's snipe, Franklin gull, LeConte sparrow, Nelson sparrow is another big one. So there's more. There's a lot more than that. But those are some examples.
Well, at the end of every Chirp Chat, I love for guests to shine a spotlight on a bird for the month. Uh,
Ah.
is there a bird you'd like to highlight this month?
Oh boy, let's see. Okay, let's go because we're doing an American woodcock walk. And that's a bird that looks like it was made from like all of the leftover parts of other birds because nothing really looks like it belongs together. It's got a very long bill, it's got huge eyes, it walks kind of funny with a little like I don't know, it's got like it's dancing. It's really cool. They're a shorebird, but they live in forests and they eat, worms, things like that, and they're very secretive and they blend very well. And so that's a great bird. And what I would like to tell people is that if they are nesting, which is coming soon, to really be careful not to disturb them because if they're disturbed off of their nests, many times they won't return to it. So it's important that we are cognizant of that in areas that they like to breed and nest.
Right. I'm thinking woodcock kind of is the shape of a Nerf ball, football,
Yeah,
kind of.
it kind of is. It kind of is. Yeah, it really is. They're just the cutest little things, and yeah, they just look awkward, but they're real neat, and they do an amazing aerial dance. They do what's called painting right at dusk, and then they do these amazing aerial. The males will do these amazing aerial displays, usually about right after sunset, and they'll fly up several hundred feet even and do these crazy loops, and then flutter back down to the earth, making this like chirping sound, and that's how they present for females, and it's really fun to go out and watch and listen to that.
That's so cool. So is this
It's
the
really cool.
season right now that this
It's the
is
season right now. Yeah, they're one of the first birds to come to make it back and to really get going. So,
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for speaking with me. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just I think it's important that we keep making these kind of steps forward in terms of acknowledging and objectively addressing our history that is intricately tied to our colonial, misogynist, and racist past as a nation. And this past does have a lot of painful elements for a lot of people that have been systematically excluded from birding and other outdoor recreational activities and careers. So change of this magnitude is not easy, but it is necessary. And I just encourage people that have never thought about this and may have an initial defensive reaction to really objectively look at the issue and see why it is necessary that we address this. I don't think anybody's looking to blame anymore. I think we're looking to move on in a way that is beneficial and productive for all people.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for helping break down this decision for our listeners.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, expert.
I know it's a tough conversation, but I think it really stems from our love and appreciation for birds.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And wanting everybody to have that opportunity to experience it and benefit from that, from the known health benefits from being outdoors and listening to birds and listening to wind in the trees and the burbling of creeks. All that is very, very important for mental health and well being.
Jeff Galligan is the co-founder of the BIPOC Birding Club of Wisconsin. He spoke with Lake Effect's Excret Nunez for a new monthly series we call Chirp Chat. At WUWM.com, you can hear more of this conversation and find last month's Chirp Chat all about how anyone can be a birder.